You're live on the news feed late night, and we continue now in conversation with Mcebo Dlamini as the Amazulu Royal family prepares to interdict, or rather to inter, I beg your pardon, the remains of the late Queen Regent Mantfombi Dlamini Zulu. A legal storm is brewing to contest the estate of the late King, Goodwill Zwelithini. This as his first wife, Queen Sibongile Dlamini, approached the Pietermaritzburg High Court seeking to inherit 50% of his assets. In a 35-page affidavit, Dlamini argues that the customary union between the king and the late queen is only recognized to the extent of the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. As such, she was never eligible to ascend to the throne. Now, customary law analyst Mcebo Dlamini believes he has some answers on these complexities of customary unions. He joins me now to discuss this further. Mcebo, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having us, my brother.
Now, many people don't know, but you are a law practitioner.
Of course.
That's what you studied, actually.
Yes.
And we talked to you mainly on your activism, but this is an area that you are well versed in. There is this dilemma, or is it a dilemma, of a terrible tension that exists, or a clash, if you will, between customary law and our common law or the Constitution. Is that a made-up thing, or is that real in a lived experience type of way?
Well, thank you for having us yet again. And besides the LLB, I also hold an anthropology because I did a PA. But today we are talking about custom and customary law and living customary law. Yeah. Having grown in Swaziland, in the royal family myself, so I understand these things better than someone who studied it in class, being taught by a white person. Now, the conflict is there, and the problem begins when we try to interpret our customs, our traditions, our ways of doing things using a white mind. We want to analyze how black people behave and deal with disputes that are for black people, yeah, using a Eurocentric mind.
Right.
Now, the problem now is that the Roman Dutch common law that we want to use to enter into what is happening now in the royal family was imposed on us. It is then very difficult to bring these in the indigenous law and the white law to speak to black people, yeah, and how black people do things. Yes, there is a conflict between customary law as we know it and the Roman Dutch, yeah, common law.
Now, you mentioned something else there in your answer. You're saying living customary law.
Yes.
There is a vast difference, and you will help me here, between living customary law and official customary law. What is that difference? Now,
living customary law means that it's what the people do now and what they've been doing before. Now, it changes. Customary law is not static. It moves with time. But it becomes a custom based on whether the people recognize it as a law that governs them, yeah, at that time. Right. Not what governed them in 1960. Yes. What governs them now. Yeah. Is it an acceptable norm or practice? Right. Is it a universal practice in that everyone in that area feels binded, yes, by it? In this case, we are zooming into the Zulu nation. Is it what the Amazulu people find as law that regulates, yes, them? Do they respect it?
Yes.
Now, it becomes official then when it is written.
Right.
But in this case of our laws as black people, more especially the Nguni people, it is not documented. Yeah. We
so
live it.
Living customary law, in terms of what you're saying, it emerges from what people believe they've been doing and what they ought to be doing, yes, in their lived experience.
Of course.
Now, it's always said that there is a significant part of customary law, specific when we're talking about the eradication of the rule of males, purely by the fact that they are the firstborn, okay, that is in conflict with human rights or women's rights in the Constitution. Tackle that.
Well, it's the primogeniture rule.
Yes.
In that the women can't be kings or they can't lead. And there are cases that it has been declared null and void in the Constitution. Now, when you then go into the culture, why it was done before, it was done because the woman is believed that she lives and goes to get married and take a certain surname and grow the surname of where she is married. Because maybe we must then deliberate on the purpose of marriage. Why do we marry wives? Why do we take wives? We take wives to grow our surnames and to, keep the surname going, the bloodline and all those things. That's the purpose why we have wives, is to multiply. There's nothing else. We do not marry people to massage our feet. We marry each other to multiply. We marry each other to make children. Even the Bible says, go and multiply like the sea, like the sand of the land. We don't know now these ones who are coming to say marriage is something else. Marriage is about multiplying, making babies, growing a certain surname. I want to multiply myself.
Yes.
I want to have children who look like me,
right,
who carry my surname.
Yeah.
Now, that's where then we then say, then the surname. Because if in our culture, unlike other cultures like the Jewish culture, in that the Jew, you become a Jew based on the mother's side.
Right.
That's how the Jews, you become a Jew, not the father's side.
Yeah.
Now, with us black people, you become a Dlamini through me.
Right.
Not through a mother that I will marry that is a Mukwena. You become a Dlamini through me. My children are Dlamini because of me, not because of the mother.
And that's, someone is saying that's precisely the challenge here. I mean, your capturing of what marriage is, your attitude towards what marriage is, plays a significant role in this view that there is a possibility of a reputation even of discriminating against women, and you're treating them as second-class citizens. You're just marrying because you are here for me to extend my surname, and those children are mine. They take my surname. What is my role here?
Well, I think if we want to look at it in that way of being civilized and looking at it at what the society is in the city, because you want to take city behavior to the rural areas, to the indigenous primitive people, to say to them they must behave like sentient boys, you are going to have problems. They don't see things the way you see it, and they are comfortable with it the way it is. It's the same way when you hear people saying, I am a feminist. You are a feminist where? Because feminism might mean a lot of things and different things to different people. A woman who is at Msinga, Ngutu, Nongoma, doesn't have the same challenges with a woman who's here in Randburg. So when you say you are speaking for women as a feminist, which women are you speaking about? Because when feminism came, it was European women in America fighting to vote. Women in the rural areas have different needs than the women who are now sophisticated and educated. So that's where then it takes us back to the conflict between the Constitution and custom and customary law. Because you have the same Bill of Rights, questioning umhlanga and ukuhlola, testing virginity. When those people there find it as a way of life, and they accept it as a way of keeping purity and growing a girl child and a boy child. So it conflicts. It's the same way that we have young people today wanting to get married through the civil marriage, which, by the way, it's a culture on its own, but a culture of white people. And they were able to sell it to black people, and we adopted something that we are failing to understand today. Now, we then neglected our own culture of marriage, because marriage is marriage.
Yeah.
Whether it's civil, which is the culture of white people, and whether I take you through my culture, you are my wife, you are your wife, and they are rights. By the way, you will find that the rights that are encompassed by the customary marriage are more than those rights of civil.
Let's talk about those rights.
We don't understand
the seniority of wives and the hierarchy really part or at the heart of this court challenge at this particular point. What's your analysis? How is the royal blood being analyzed here, and where is the disconnect?
Well, look, now, firstly, when we talk about a king, once we acknowledge that this individual is a king, he is a leader, we then mean we elevate him above all of us. He ceases to be normal. He's a king. You then separate a king and ingwenyama, isilo. Those things mean different things. A king is the head of state, and ingwenyama, isilo, is above the law. Immediately when you say ingwenyama, isilo, you mean everything that he has is in trust of the nation. He owns nothing. We see those challenges in court that they want an estate. The king doesn't own anything. What is it that they are claiming in court? Because the king doesn't own anything. Everything he has is for the Zulu people. He is holding it in trust of the nation. He owns nothing. Now you begin to understand that they are very same people who call themselves proponents of culture, don't know their own culture and why they are there and what they represent when they are there. That's where the problem begins. Now, when we talk of wives of a king, there might be 20 wives.
Yeah.
But there is a wife wamasiko. Umfazi wamasiko.
We'll come back in a moment, and I want you to unpack that a little bit as we take a break here on the Newsfeed Late Night. Mcebo Dlamini with us here as we get into that conversation, that debate around the application of customary law in the saga of the Amazulu monarch. Stay with us. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next. Leading now in the news here on the Newsfeed Late Night, investigations are underway after 14 Filipino crew members traveling from India to Durban test positive for COVID-19. ANC spokesperson Pietermaritzburg says the Secretary General's office will send suspension letters to members as part of the party's step-aside rule. Regent Queen Mantfombi Dlamini Zulu's remains have left Joburg and are expected in KwaZulu-Natal tomorrow. A conversation around tensions in the implementation of customary law and common law of succession with Mcebo Dlamini continues now. So before the break, you were mentioning the ceremonial, traditional, cultural wife and the effect of that particular union in terms of the hierarchy.
Yes. Now, when we talk about the ceremonial, traditional, cultural wife, now we are then saying immediately when that particular person comes, he occupies a certain position in the family, in that there are certain roles and rituals that she begins to perform that no other wife performs, because she is now a ceremonial wife. Is a wife for culture, she's a wife for rituals.
Yeah.
Now, then it separates the competition between the wives themselves, and they accept it. Once they say, umfazi wamasiko, then you already know which role she plays. The same way that you know there is a defender, there is a midfielder, there is a striker, there is umfazi wamasiko, ongena ngesiko, ungena in that particular family through a certain culture and tradition. Now, by virtue of the third wife coming from a royal family, having a royal blood, not a weak royal blood, but from another monarch, it then says, it's unfortunate that we are speaking this thing in English and translation, a lot of things will be lost in translation when we are talking about things that affect us as black people. Yeah. Yeah. Immediately when she enters your house, she swallows that house. We don't care how many wives you have.
So does the ceremonial traditional cultural wife then nullify any other civil marriage that could have existed, and in this particular case it's a third wife, before the coming in of umfati wesiko?
Well, in normal course, a man doesn't get married through civil marriages as a traditionalist, because that is foreign to us. We can't relate to it. We are confused when we get there. Now, in this case, because it's an extraordinary case, we will then look at the first marriage itself, how it and when it happened. And then, because remember that customary law was recognized in 1998 in South Africa, when it began to be recognized as legal. But then the very same law, it says any customary law that might have happened before 1988 can then be changed into customary law. Into customary marriage. If it happened before 1998, that's the very same law. What we don't know then, in the case of the Zulu monarch, is whether in 1988 was the marriage converted into customary marriage. But now there are developments that one might argue in this case, in that, let's assume it wasn't, for argument's sake. I would argue to you that she waived her rights of the civil marriage.
Why?
Because there are 5 wives, 4 of customary marriage. She contested those marriages after 40 years. She was married in 1969 in civil. She contested in 2021. After 40 years and above, you've waived your rights. Why have you been quiet? Why didn't you apply for divorce? You accepted that you will be binded by the custom because you understood where you were, that you were in royalty, and it was a mistake that you took that route. Probably it's because you were young and you were not indoctrinated into deep culture and practices and norms. That's an argument. Before a customary marriage is declared legal and valid, the senior wife must accept it. She must participate in the proceedings. These marriages didn't happen at night.
Yeah.
These marriages didn't happen when she was in coma.
Yeah.
They all happened when she was there. And she participated, actively participated.
So our court of law are going to, is that what they're going to look at? And
they have to look at it,
the marriage was consented, was celebrated, you were part of it.
Of course.
You acknowledge and you said
there's no other thing that the court will look at.
This exists.
Of course. There's nothing else that the court will look at. Were you consulted? Did you participate? Were the ceremonies a practice? Was then exchange of gifts, and you were there, and you participated in the exchange of gifts.
Yes.
So I mean, we have reached a stage where people are holding culture at ransom, intentionally undermining values, intentionally, destroying what we are as black people, using laws that are foreign to us as black people. They are foreign and contradictory. That's why we are struggling to apply them. The first wife says she was abducted. In her affidavit, she says a process of ugutwala. She was abducted. That's illegal.
But it is the way things are done. Is
in law, when you are abducted, a marriage, there must be consent.
And saying in customary...
You can't... we are talking civil here. She was married in civil. The dispute we have here is a conflict between civil and custom. In custom, we will be talking something else. You can't be abducted to be married in civil marriage. That's illegal. It nullifies the very same marriage that you're going to court with. Because it means the marriage is invalid. Because there was no consent. Probably that's why there were 4 wives that followed. We will wait for the court to deal with that. But we have brought issues here to say there are 4 marriages that happened in customary marriage.
Yeah.
Now, the 3rd wife, umfazi wamasiko, I'm going to bring something that is significant to you, that speaks that the wife was not a normal wife. The way she entered the royal family was not a normal one. When the Zulu king married the 3rd wife, the cows, the lobola, was not paid by the king, but it was paid by the Zulu nation. Each homestead was taking out a cow. That's a significance that the courts need to interpret. What it means, unfortunately, we are asking Eurocentric courts to speak to our values. The lawyers for the royal family must then say, we can't speak these using the same constitution and Roman Dutch law.
Yeah.
We are then asking for experts, traditional law experts, traditionalists who have lived this thing, to explain this thing. You then call the same umdana kaphindangene, kachaptelezi. Those are the elders. Those are the proponents
to come and explain. Let's then talk about the fact that maybe, yes, it's a legal, customary marriage, and the first wife says, I recognize that it is. The question now comes on the eligibility to the throne, and that is the big question. Yes, she could have been part of the wives, and in customary law, I recognized it, I was a part of it, and yes, I do accept it in that context, but she is not eligible to the throne.
No. Now, when you talk about the hierarchy of the wives, you then talk about the palaces themselves. Which palace one comes from. In the Zulu tradition, Kangela Mankenga is the one where the Indlunkulu stays. That's cultural. That's practice. That's acceptable norms. Nobody disputed that. When the 3rd wife was taken to stay at Kangela Mankengan, there are certain things that you can't dispute today. You are holding us at ransom. You are making culture to be a mockery. You are making white people to be excited that as black people, we have no direction. It hurts what is happening there. It hurts because these are old people. These are people who know tradition. But today they want to behave as if they are Model Cs. We are then going to have problems in preaching customs and values. In ordinary course, this matter was not supposed to go to court. It was supposed to go to traditional courts. Bekumele iye emphakathi, kuhlalwe phasi esihlahla ikhulunywe. Then you call the elders, those who were there when the wives were being married, and explain the significance and the occurrences that happened there. Even in appointing the one who takes over the king, there are significance. How the child was born. What happened? Are there any occurrences that happened when this one was born? Sometimes they will say, when this one was born, he had the teeth. When this one was born, this happened. When this one was born, those things speak. We can't ignore them you can ignore them in Cape Town, where there is no culture. But in KwaZulu, you can't ignore those things. Even if you want, you can't ignore them. Those are the things that the court will be dealing with. What makes this one to be unique over this one? Then you bring letehlakalo. When this one was born, when this one was born, it was not used. I want to bring that up. You can say, when this one was born, he was born on top of a leopard skin.
Right.
Why? What was the significance of that?
These are some of the questions that we hope will come out, I suppose, in this conversation. Sibongile, appreciate your time, and thank you very much for coming through tonight. Those, of course, other views of Mcebo Dlamini. None of what he said comes from me or part of what we are saying here as a station. But that's his analysis of what customary law is about. You will make, of course, your view. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next.